I've said it in different ways, but in every bucket I've talked about, Minnesota can be a leader. Minnesota can move culture, and Minnesotans can make the change we want to see in this industry. Minnesota can become the home for independent film, and where every interesting artist comes to make their movie, and we nurture the homegrown talent here and make them feel just as valuable as that first-time filmmaker who came in from California.
Sometimes it's tough to start with biography because we can spend probably half an hour on most folks' background. But I think your experience and background is fascinating and deep and varied, and probably would lend a lot of credibility to the conversation because I know you're going to bring a lot of value. So you want to give us like the professional side of Andrew's life and all the fun stuff?
Everything makes sense when you look backwards. When I was going forward, there was no plan. I started off sort of experimenting with film, just sort of fun hobby sort of stuff. Made a film in high school that did well. In college I sort of played around with it. Then I came back to Minnesota after graduating after undergrad, and I got an internship at what was called the Minnesota Film Board back then. And within 6 months, there were 3 staff there when I started there, and I was the intern. Within 6 months, all 3 of them were gone, and me, intern, was running the space.
Okay. What era was this? You don't have to date.
This was 1988.
Okay. Right before the boom?
Right before the boom. I was there. I worked for the Film Board. I was director of production from 88 to 90. That started a career as a location manager. Back then, every big filmmaker came through. I mean, there was Altman, there was Philip Noyce, Merchant Ivory came through. Worked with David Lynch. I got a lot of great personal time with some of the filmmakers that I really, really liked. Worked with Alan Rudolph, who did a film called Equinox that was with Matthew Modine and Marissa Tomei, and I was just out of college and I was just doing this, and he was like, "Why don't you be my location manager?" And I was like, "I don't know how to do that." I mean, usually people just fake it till you make it, and you say, "Sure, great." But my response to everybody has always been like, "I've never done that before," and they said, "Yeah, but I think you can," and so do it. And I was like, "Okay," but I had gotten into NYU Film School, and so he said, "Okay, work with us for a while and then hire your boss." So I hired, this is stupid that I hired him, Bob Graff, who's like the most amazing location manager and now one of the most amazing producers. The idea, and I still remember like the launch party turned into like a wrap party for me, and they gave me gifts, and I could see Bob on the other side of the room looking at me like, "You didn't do a effing thing." It's sort of like, I just, I seriously, I made maps, and I made them how they made sense to me. So north was never always north. It was like, oh, it's where I'm sitting, and I'm going to draw a line this way to where I'm going and all that. And the crew would be like, "This map makes no sense." Mm-hmm. So I made his job much harder. But anyway, then that happened when I worked for Sundance. They reached out to me, and I was like, "Well, I've never worked for a festival before." And they were like, "Well, we think you can do it." And then when I started at FilmNorth, they were like, it was called IFP back then. It's like, "I've never run a nonprofit." And they were like, "Well, we think you can." What I like to say with those sorts of things is like, I want people to get the same opportunities I had, which is just, if you're smart, you're talented, and you don't have the resume to back it up, but we think you can do it. Just, I want everyone to feel like they don't have those constraints. But back, you'll see, there's a method to my madness in talking about things, but, I've worked in film my whole life. I'm a working artist running a nonprofit now. But in the middle of that, I started to program. I worked for Sundance. I started to work for the Provincetown Film Festival, but built that festival with the team into an Oscar qualifying fest. There's only 60 of those in the U.S. out of 3,000 some festivals. So I'm really proud of that, and getting it to a space where we have honorees like Tilda Swinton and Sofia Coppola, and last year was Andrew Hay and Coleman Domingo. And but then that led me to, eventually, there's this company called Works. Elizabeth Redleaf and Christine Walker founded that in Minnesota. And so I spent 4 years there producing movies around, tier 1 union films. And then, I just sort of felt the time to move on. And I had given my notice. Nobody knew I was leaving. And I got a call from a friend who was on the board at what was then called IFP Minnesota, and said, we need an interim executive director right now. And do you have any recommendations? And I was like, well, I'm free. And so I thought I was just signing on for 6 months, and I really got bit. I had spent the entire 90s working here as a location manager, and, worked with wonderful crews here, but as we know, the crew base, particularly then, was predominantly white, predominantly male, predominantly straight. And what I saw at IFP were youth programs that were 80% kids of color, 90% qualifying for free or reduced lunch, and saying, where are we losing these kids? Where are we losing these kids? The diversity's here, the talent's here. And that's really what made me want to stay, was to try to find a solution and be a part of a solution for what I saw was a problem. Some people, I mean, I'm frustrated. I think some people here don't see it as a problem. But we want our crew base to reflect what Minnesota really looks like. And and it does make better work. So I don't feel like I have to argue it, but it sounds like I'm starting there. But but that's really what kept me there. And I was able to, with WorkWorks and with IFP, now FilmNorth, I kept my job at Provincetown. Both places saw the value in me continuing to do that. I still consult independent films. I still write. There's a lot of other fun stuff that I do, but that's kind of the career.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, okay. A couple of things you said I want to unpack. David Lynch, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that, RIP. So you're working locations on Straight Story. Did you get a chance to work with him, or are you in advance quite a bit?
It was awesome. So the lead location manager was Bob Medcraft. Bob.
Choo-choo Bob.
Yeah. Yep. Bob. There were a lot of location managers back in the 90s. I did find, myself, it was, Ann Haley and other, Mark Haar, great folks. But Bob had gotten the call for the Lynch movie. And at that point, I was really managing, not assistant managing, but it was a chance so Bob gave me a ring, and it was just sort of like, we need some help, would you do this? And I was like, basically, it's not your rate, it's not your title. I was like, I don't care. It's working with David Lynch. Sign me up. So the story goes, they shot in the real locations. Alvin Strait rode his tractor, his lawnmower across the entire state of Iowa. So our locations were the entire state of Iowa. So we sort of split it up. We all, and I worked on certain sections, and they worked on certain sections. Bob had a handle on what was going everywhere, but he couldn't be everywhere. It was amazing. It was amazing watching David work, and I got a lot of special time with David. There was, it didn't make it into the movie, but one thing that was assigned to me were exotic animal farms. David thought he was going to incorporate them. So there was ostrich, elk, bison, I forget what else, but but I scouted those out, and David would send me out looking for things as well. And he wanted to, I seem to recall, this is true in my mind. He said, I need to know if when you go to a location, you see either a deer or a rabbit. And I was like, okay. And I came back one time, I thought I found the perfect location. I would scout a location, and I'd be like, this is perfect. Then I was like, now I got to can sit here until I see a rabbit or a deer. And then one day I just couldn't wait any longer. And I went back and I said, here's perfect. He said, did you see a rabbit or deer? And I said, yes. And he was like, did you? And I was like, no. And he was like, okay. And it was like, I said, I'll go back and I'll wait for a rabbit. It's the location you need. And it was sort of like, it's perfect. But he was so painterly with all of his location choices. David also shot, the other memories, he shot on he had a 3D camera, that still camera that he would shoot on. Okay. And, he gave me a little personal tutorial because I thought it was so interesting. And he would meditate during lunch. He did all the wallpapering sometimes it was hard to get him on a scout because he just liked to get his hands dirty. He had a shovel in his hand, or he was doing something with he was putting up the wallpaper himself. It's like, we got other people. But we finished like 2 weeks ahead of, I want to say it was almost 2 weeks ahead of schedule we finished. He just knew what he wanted. Yeah. He shot it. And it was, and he also respected, and I really appreciated this, the fragility of his lead actor, and Richard Farnsworth, who really couldn't do a lot of takes. And physically, he had his nurse with him on the set, and he was great at what he did, but he was just like, he wasn't going to last all day, and he wasn't going to be fresh take after take. And David just adjusted his work for that. And he was just really, really great. He was fun to watch. Yeah,
well, and that's why he's beloved, right? Because he had empathy and he cared for his collaborators.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we want as filmmakers. We create families on the films. And what I really liked, the other thing I remember about him as well is that Bob, Mark, and I were some of the only new hires. The rest of the crew were for the most part, people that had worked with him all the time.
Yep. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand. We create these like kind of carnival families, right? Where you build these intense relationships that are, short-lived, burn hot, and then you scatter like seeds, right? And you're kind of like left kind of wanting some of that back, but you got to move on and you'll make the next family. It's a really kind of odd way to work and live. Being in proximity to so many seminal artists and filmmakers and actors, have you found that there's anything consistent amongst them? I mean, clearly a wide breadth of folks where there's probably nothing consistent other than being really passionate about what they do. Are there any lessons to be learned?
It's a good question. I'm not quite sure what the through line is. They're all good listeners for the most part. The first thing that comes to mind is, remember when we honored Sofia Coppola, and all of our directing honorees get interviewed by John Waters, so it's a very interesting conversation. It doesn't always go the expected route. But and I don't want to speak for her or mangle her words, but what I remember her saying was, there was a time where she was attached to do The Little Mermaid. And she said she sort of had a revelation. She was just like, I can make movies at this certain budget, and I know I can make everybody their money back. And she said, and I have a career at this budget level. If I go up to this crazy high budget level and I fail, I could be in the wilderness for a long time. And also, is that really my career arc? Is that really why I got into filmmaking? And that sort of self-knowledge, I think, is something that I would say is a through line with a lot of the filmmakers. They understand their strengths, their weaknesses, but they also understand what makes a sustainable career for them.
How to survive.
Yeah. And it is about balancing work and life and about budget size. Sean Baker just recently said it about being an indie lifer at the Spirit Awards.
Incredible speech.
Yeah, which is just amazing. But but the thing is like, I'm lucky in that a lot of the filmmakers that I've worked with are in that school of, I didn't get in this to go on a career arc where I'm going to be where I'm a studio person, that you're a plug and play studio director. I'm always going to tell a story that means something to me. And, but that doesn't always pay the rent. So it's finding a way to do that. What I've always said and feel like I still haven't found the answer for is we have to redefine what success means. If our definition of success is an infinity pool off Mulholland Drive, okay, I can tell you how to go about that career. But but most of us, we're not in it for the things, we're in it for the work, and we're in it for to say something. There are a lot of stories out there, and I use that as an example with us as filmmakers. We have a lot of stories to choose from as we tell them. Long ago, somebody gave me a bit of a formula, like a math formula, saying why now plus who cares equals relevancy. So if you can answer that, and relevancy is what gets your film funded. Relevancy is what gets people to buy tickets, and and it starts with why now for this story. And who cares is a tough way to look at it. But a lot of times we think we know our audiences, or we say, oh, there's 4 quadrants and here's how I answer that question. But the who cares is really just about, it's very closely related to why now, which is like, why does anybody care about this film now? It's not like, we made a film with James Franco called Howl, but it's about First Amendment rights. It's borderline experimental sort of doc narrative hybrid made by wonderful filmmakers, Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman. And 127 Hours was at the same time. And they're like, well, let's capitalize off of that. And I said, the audience for 127 Hours is not the audience for an avant-garde queer film starring James Franco. It's like, the equivalent now is how people keep talking about how many Instagram followers you have. Yep. It's like, are they going to come to see the movie?
Are they going to pay? Yeah.
It's like, if at that time, this was before Franco became sort of, the problematic sort of, person he is now, but at that point, he had very broad appeal with, for the most part, young girls. Mm-hmm. They're not going to see the queer film about this. It's sort of like, so, from my desk at Works, I'd oftentimes get a filmmaker trying to tell me who's going to see their film, and they would use well, it stars so-and-so, so all of their fans are going to come. And it's like, that's not how this works. We can look at very big budget films with big stars that have tanked. And a lot of it has to do with the why now, who cares? Mm-hmm. And also, I don't want people to stay in sort of rigid lanes, but we are, and I don't like always to use the word brand, but I'll use it here, but as filmmakers, as actors, as artists, we all know we can do everything, but you have to, Spike Lee made a certain kind of film, for those first 3 or 4 films, and he built a brand. And then when you've got the brand, you can branch off. A lot of us want to branch off a little early. And it's, there are always exceptions to the rule. There's exceptions to everything I say, but in general, it's like, this is, don't make a doc, then a musical, then a comedy. To date myself, it's the American Idol analogy of just saying, like, what's your album? I don't get you. This week you sang country. Now you're singing pop. Who are you?
Right.
Because this is an industry that needs to make a decision quickly about you. And they don't like to be told to think more than that, frankly. They're just like, oh, Spike Lee, his last film. Oh, and this one's in the same vein. Sign me up.
Right.
It's like, oh, as opposed to now he's going to do a movie musical. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Just because the first one made money doesn't mean the second one does.
Let's pivot a little bit to the industry, because it's not the same that it was last year, 5 years ago. Certainly the cost of, production is going to near zero for a lot of folks, right? Scale and scope now easier to do than ever. But yeah, what's your take on kind of where we're at and where we're going, and what should people be thinking about?
Yeah. I think we're slow to respond is one thing. Living in the film festival world, No, but and I'm a big fan of Sundance for my years there and the family that I still have there. But that doesn't mean I think everything they do is right. I don't think that and I think from the top down we haven't adapted from a '90s models of festivals, where we had 3 TV networks and everything had to play at a theater, and we had VHS and for a period of time VHS and DVD to augment your revenue streams, and the number of submissions because you had to shoot on film, transfer it, and submit a VHS. Kevin Smith submitted Clerks on a VHS transfer from a Super 16 shoot. It's like, there were fewer submissions. There might have even, I don't know what the numbers were from the 90s, but there might have only been 1,000. Now there's 12,000, and everybody has the means and the agency to make a film. It doesn't mean it's good, but it's like, they've got to watch it.
You have a studio in your pocket right now.
Yeah. But the relationship for a festival and an artist, I think, is one thing that hasn't changed. When revenue streams and platforms and theatrical, like say how many documentaries do we see in theaters anymore? We don't.
Mm-hmm.
March of the Penguins, Super Size Me, Roger and Me, they broke records. They made hundreds of millions of dollars at the box office. Now, if they were made today, they'd go straight to streaming. But the festivals still treat it like it's 1990 with this. And I feel like, and when we don't have these revenue streams for it, we have to recognize, I feel, that festivals need to change their relationship with the artist to have some profit sharing, or just what it is that you're offering. Give us something as artists, because it's like, you don't exist without us, and we need you to exist as well. So it's like, it has to be a two-way street. It has to be win-win. And money is how it becomes win-win. Yeah. I think, but that is all reflective of a changing industry that is now very much streaming, and streaming is changing itself. In the early days, when a lot of money was throwing into it and they had a lot of money to spend, and now it's all back in-house. So it's, I don't have the answer is the long thing, but I just say, there are a lot of leaders here, and I feel like everybody's still trying to figure it out, but it's been going on long enough now where I'm like, why haven't we figured it out yet?
Yeah. I think we're all making it up as we go along. Well, I mean, festivals are crucially important for discovering new voices, right? And historically, film was expensive. A certain community was opted in easier than others, and it's amazing that you're fighting for that. So, yeah, finding a way for these folks that don't have the means necessarily to continue to work is, I think, pretty obviously crucial.
The important thing I think of for the role that festivals play is that at a time when, say, 12,000 plus submit to Sundance, the industry looks to festivals to go through all of that and then curate what gets lifted up. What I find frustrating in a lot of festivals is just repeating what other festivals play. I think what I've seen in the last few years, and I'm heartened to see this, is programming for community instead of for the industry. Certain festivals like Sundance, South by Southwest, and Tribeca are market festivals in the U.S. So they serve the industry is their primary audience.
It's a buy and sell
Yeah.
sort of thing. Yep.
They're not necessarily what do people in Utah want to see, what do people in Austin want to see, though there's a little of that for sure. But the rest of the festivals tended to just sort of lift up, oh, what's the best that's been done this year, and here's what these 3 festivals say. As opposed to for Provincetown, for instance. So Provincetown, for people that don't know, it's the very tip of Cape Cod. It's a town of 3,000 people. It's an island of misfit toys, but that said, it's a very interesting 3,000 people. But what I do and what we do as a programming team there is, we look at stories that are impacting New England. The fishing industry. There's a large Portuguese population. It's the point of first contact with between Europe and indigenous cultures in the U.S. When I started, I was like, we need to have indigenous programming here every year. This is part of who this town is. When it was the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower in 2020, I was like, this is a complicated thing, and Provincetown has something to say about this. So, and with the Portuguese community, there's the largest Portuguese community in the U.S. is from Connecticut up to the Cape. And I was like, where's our Portuguese content? That's programming for your community. It's not repeating everything you saw at the big festivals and expecting everyone to come. But what I started with there is just, I think from my desk at FilmNorth and from my virtual desk at Provincetown, it's about lifting up and amplifying. One of my couple favorite stories that I have there is there's a young filmmaker here in Minnesota. I thought he was amazing, and made a 5-minute film. And Eugene Hernandez, who's now the head of Sundance, was the head of Lincoln Center at the time. And he comes to Provincetown every year. And I just said, Eugene, you got 5 minutes to look at a short? And he was like, yeah. And he said, I love it. And the next time that filmmaker was in New York, somebody with very little credits out of Minnesota was meeting with the head of Lincoln Center.
Yeah, crazy.
This happens because if we want change, we have to do something, and we have to take action, and we have to amplify and lift up these voices. I'm always going to back the underdog. I'm always going to back the scrappy up and comer. I'm going to back the person who's trying to break into an industry that has told them they're not welcome, and found a way in on their own. And it's sort of like, and I'm really proud about that work. Every year Sundance will call me and call FilmNorth, and just say, is there anybody we should be paying attention to? From a writer, whether it's the writer labs or the producer labs or the directing labs, and it's just, and it's giving them links and giving them names and saying how excited we are, and telling them why they should be excited too.
Yeah. Well, kind of a theme that I've heard a lot through this conversation was like fighting for the underdog and underserved communities. And I know FilmNorth has been pulled into some political drama as of late. I'm not sure how deep you want to get into this, but as a nonprofit, a lot of your funding comes from grants, right?
Yeah.
And the federal government has recently decided that anything that is promoting diversity is persona non grata, or whatever the term, organization non grata, right? And that affects what you can do, right? Yeah. How do you think this ends?
It was said in a statement we put out there. It's a perilous time right now. There are going to be nonprofits that go under. There are going to be challenges here. We're lucky to live in a state that protects and values everyone who lives here, and doesn't see diversity as a bad thing. One thing I'm proud of, just as a baseline, is that several years before this upset, of course, we asked our membership, which reflects Minnesota, and in that respect is about 80%, our membership, about 80% white, saying, should FilmNorth prioritize supporting artists from underrepresented communities? And a membership base that is 80% white said yes. So this isn't me speaking from where I want to make that clear. This is saying what our community has said is our values, what our state says is our values. And happily, we're aligned. It would have been an issue if we hadn't been. But I want to say this is not just FilmNorth, and it's not virtue signaling in any sense. But when the NEA, we were congressionally approved for 2 grants totaling $60,000, and it was congressionally approved and signed contracts. So we are waiting for the courts to figure this out. There is a pause on this. There is a chance that a ruling can come down saying that we can accept these grants. But what is trying to come through with the executive orders related to this, it says not only is the program that received funding not serving diverse communities, your organization cannot. And we're like, well, that will never happen. So if that is going to be the final word, we will turn down this grant and we will not apply in the future. The current next round of grants at the NEA is only accepting applications that celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Constitution, or the Declaration of Independence. So we're not going to be putting in for that. I'd like to think that this is at most a 2-year wait for sanity and order to be restored, but diversity makes us great. The companies that have stood up for this, including Best Buy and others here, have said, it helps us understand our communities better, our customers better. It helps us. We shouldn't have to argue this, but thankfully, that's some of the state arts board funding comes from the federal government and the NEA, but we're also fortunate in Minnesota that a lot of it comes from the Legacy Amendment, which is funded from sales tax, which isn't tied to any federal restrictions. There might be some belt tightening a little bit around that. I don't know if that's the case, but the point there is that we're fortunate in Minnesota, and when FilmNorth and the Guthrie and the Playwrights Center all put out statements around this, I got a call from a friend in New York who donates to FilmNorth annually, along with, a dozen other film organizations. He said, FilmNorth is the only one of the organizations I support that put a statement out. And while I'm very proud of that, I'm also, it made me reflect and say, I think some of those other states feel that there will be ramifications for them to make a statement like that they 100% want to make that statement. And, and this is where I think Minnesota can lead. And I think it can also be, to get back to film, we all want more film work in this state. Let's make it clear that those films are welcome here, and that it isn't just, lip service.
Right.
We've been doing this. This is baked into our values for decades. So I'd like to, it's hard to say, I don't want to sound crass and say I'm looking for the opportunity in this, but crisis is opportunity.
I know these executive orders have been kind of done with a broad swipe with very little nuance, right? But from a storytelling perspective, I don't need to hear stories from people that are like me. Right. The best ones are where I'm learning something new, right? And if we quash those voices, the art suffers. What's another thing that, here in the upper Midwest, our creative and film communities could be doing better? Whether that's at an artist level, as an organizational level, at a state level, which we'll get into as well in a little bit. But.
Well, the one thing I don't know if it's 100% there, but what brings to my mind is really just festival strategy is something that I think is still a mystery to a lot of people. I'm dealing with a film right now that is a Canadian film. And they did something that I see happen in Minnesota a lot, is they targeted the Canadian festival they wanted to premiere at. It was Inside Out, which is Canada's queer film festival. They won it. It's a June festival. The festival cycle goes from, U.S. festival cycles generally, Sundance in January till Tribeca in June. So they premiered in June, and they realized they premiered at the end of a festival cycle. Then they have to wait the entire summer. Then they're too late to apply for the summer festivals, and they can apply to the fall. And then the fall festivals are going to look back and say, oh, that's last year's content. And it's and I'm like, this is a great film. They didn't know festival strategy. They should have waited 1 year. But the big message with that for what I would say Minnesota and, any filmmakers anywhere, but as we're talking about Minnesota filmmakers, is understanding festival cycles, there are festival cycles. For U.S. content, it generally begins with Sundance in January and ends with Tribeca in June. Provincetown, which I run, is a June festival that overlaps with Tribeca now, but Tribeca is bigger than us, so I'll use them as the tail. But we're certainly there as well. Provincetown's interesting as well because just as an aside, we're an international festival, not an exclusive LGBTQ fest. But the summer is generally the time for LGBTQ plus fests. So Provincetown kicks that off, and then it's Frameline and Outfest and New Fest and queer festivals around the country. So we're that bridge. And then the fall starts up again with Toronto. And the fall tends to be the function of fall festivals for the most part is a rollout of Oscar films. There are exceptions to every one of the rules, but from Toronto in September until Sundance in January, that tends to be a mix of some films from the previous cycle and then the Oscar rollout films, and programming for your community. What in that bucket works for you, but the main one we look at, the main bucket, is Sundance to Tribeca. And that means an application submission period that starts, say, July and ends in February. So I always tell filmmakers, it's like, try to time your film to be 100% done to take advantage of the full cycle. Because any one of those festivals, back in the day, Sundance was seen as the only one that really sort of moved the needle on your career. That's not the case anymore. You're as you experienced, with Ghost of the Machine, it's like it depends what type of film and where it fits best and where those people in our industry attend and pay attention. I recently talked to a filmmaker that got into a great festival, Woodstock, and they were like, we're thinking of leaving in the middle of Woodstock to do this. And I said, don't. I said, for the other festival's great. But I was like, but Woodstock is one of those 24 festivals where you don't know what can happen at a party, at a coffee shop, at your screening, at someone else's screening. It's like, you'll only know it if you stay. And strangers don't fund your films. So festivals are the opportunity to meet them. And they're like, I like him. I like her. I like them.
And sometimes playing, 8 a.m. on a Sunday to Tier 1 is worse than a Saturday night premiere at a smaller festival.
Be careful what you wish for. It's sort of like, we get some pushback at Provincetown where some people will say, you say we offer them a matinee slot on a Saturday. They're like, no, we want Friday night. It's like, no, you want the matinee slot on Saturday. I'm giving you a great slot. Mm-hmm. This is a beach town. This is a town with a million options of what to do in the evening. Mm-hmm. There's a drag show. There's this, there's that. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like, and a lot of, there's bars and there's this and there's fun and all this other stuff. And we, in the evenings, you compete more with that. And those are great slots for certain films. So we know we'll always draw. But for sometimes it's that scrappy film. It's like, I'm giving you a great slot. Understand that. Right. But to what you're saying is like, sometimes getting into Sundance, it's like, or Toronto, is be careful what you wish for. I don't like the term no-name talent, but, that's what the industry uses, is just saying somebody who's just not, well-known. That doesn't mean they're not good actors. But it's like, it's hard sometimes to sell a ticket to that film. And, and programmers are taking that into consideration about what films they're programming opposite you. They're trying to draw people in, and it's like they're trying to create a great experience for it. They're not just randomly doing it or punishing you. Nobody accepts a film to punish it. It's sort of like, where, so it's, feel free to challenge it and ask, but don't assume that what works in your experience of Friday, 7 p.m. is the slot I want, is what works in a tourist town. Yeah. Or that works in Miami or works in New Orleans. Yeah. Let the festival programmers take care of you and just make sure that they're doing that. Right.
Well, on that note, how can a filmmaker help themselves, help the programmer in the festival? How do they show up? How do they prepare?
Yeah. Well, understand that they're meeting you on paper first. So a lot of times I would say, brevity is really important in any communication you have. I told a filmmaker here, I just said, where are you from? And she said, Sarasota, Florida. I said, well, Sarasota's got a good festival. When you apply to them, tell them you're from there. Because what the subtext there is you're going to bring an audience. Yep. You're going to sell, you made their job a little easier because you're going to fill half the house with your friends and family. Mm-hmm. But also on the flip side, they like to support local. They want to know this.
It's a good narrative.
Yeah. For Provincetown, I often say, I like the people that do the research. And the good news for filmmakers is you only have to go back 1 to 2 years for that festival to understand it. What I say is if the film that got into Sundance 20 years ago might not get in today. So don't say, my film's just like Super Size Me. They're like, the doc world has moved past this, has moved on now. But if you look quickly at Provincetown, you'll see what I said before: a film about the arts, about Portuguese community, indigenous, about the climate change because we're a fragile ecosystem and all these things, the oceans and water quality, housing insecurity. You'll see this in our lineup and say like, hey, I saw you did that. It's like, I remember, I'll name names with this one, Jesse Reisler, very talented filmmaker here, made the film Starfish Throwers. And, I was talking to him and I said, your film's about hunger. Sonoma is about food. They should care about hunger. And in his submission, I say, in your submission, say that. Mm-hmm. Tell them. Don't assume they're going to connect those dots. And it made their festival, you're making their festival better. And you're letting them know how. When a filmmaker says to me, it's like, hey, I saw that you played Four Sheets to the Wind by Sterling Harjo. That was a film that really meant a lot to me, and I like your programming style. Here's how or my film's about, has a Portuguese character. My film has this, whatever. It's like, you did your research. Immediately it pops. I get a lot of, on that Film Freeway page, there's a lot of very boilerplate language, and I think the filmmakers don't understand what they're saying is like what everybody's saying. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm poor. I mean, we get this a lot of times on saying, I'm poor, can you waive the fee? It's like, you know what? We're a nonprofit and we're poor. And also every filmmaker tells us that. Right. And what it also tells me, because I'm a producer, is you didn't budget for this. Mm-hmm. It's like, this is one of the big things for filmmakers is budget for the festivals. If you know that you need them, then you need airfare, lodging, and per diem, and or at least some of it, because the festival is only going to meet you part of the way. Yep. Unless you're their opening night film, you are a precious film to them, but you're one of 50 to 100 to 200 films.
You're telling them a story before they even often see the film, right? These are leading indicators on whether they're thinking ahead on this stuff. Are they thinking about the intended audience, right? Yeah. And that may reflect poorly upon their film, even if it's great. You can't give them the benefit of...
with a short film, with a late submission fee, it can be easily over $100 to do it. I don't want to collect anybody's fee for a film that didn't ever stand a chance. Yeah. So it's, and those filmmakers would have found the answer to that question if they had done just 10 minutes of research on our festival.
Yeah. Let's talk about FilmNorth a little bit. You got a nice new building coming. Yeah. Why don't you tell us about the new space a little bit, and then some of the classes and services that FilmNorth offers?
Thanks. The main through line there is the main story with FilmNorth is that I'm a working artist running an organization, a film organization. In developing and creating a building, it's creating something I wish I had moving up. This building is such a special building, and it brought so much to the table, and we were able to create so much more than we could have anywhere else. But it came with some restrictions, and one of them was the size of the cinema. With the max it could be was 50 seats. I had about 2 days of being really bummed out, and then I had this moment of like, oh, it's an incubator space. Filmmakers can test their DCP before they send it off to a festival. They can do a cast and crew screening. They can self-distribute their film. They can do a fundraiser. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not programming first run films, they can do it on a Friday night. They can do it on a Saturday night. They can, there's, just having that access, and then also what they deserve. This is going to be one of the most beautiful cinemas in the country. DO Architects designed the space and partnered with us on the building. We did not want to create just another black box where a photo from that space looks like it'd be anywhere. Mm-hmm. This is going to be, a beautiful space serves two things. First off, it's a space you want to spend time in. You want to come to. We all have the cinemas that were like, never again. Or, I like that one, but only if. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like, but here's my favorite cinema. I hope that film plays there. This is going to be the best cinema around. Dolby Atmos sound, DCP, the air quality in the room, because we've been able to build it now post-pandemic up, is going to be really safe. But what I really love is the idea of a teenager making their first film, and their first experience seeing their work on a big screen is in a room that makes them feel valued, and that they can see that they can see what success looks like. The grand opening will be July 19th. We haven't announced it yet, so this is the first that is coming out Saturday. It'll be a community. We're coming up with another name because I don't want to make it sound like this isn't a fundraiser. This is free. This is we made a very conscious choice to have our grand opening be free. I look at things a little differently. There are a lot of folks that are like, everything's a fundraising opportunity. It still is, but I don't want our big unveiling to have a price point. I want everyone to walk through it and imagine themselves there and to see what they can do with it. And, we can come up with other ways to raise money, and we can ask for money during the space, but it's like, I trust that in just serving the community and being an authentic partner, the money will follow.
Yep.
And to that point, we need money. We probably got about another $1 million to raise. Take a look. It's, on our website, there's a donate link. There's a lot of opportunities to give. Every dollar matters.
And memberships.
We're going to revamp those as well, because we're going to come up with some levels with that, because there are filmmakers like yourself, I feel, are not being served well right now in the community as far as what they need. And so there's a membership that we're crafting together with that would say waive fiscal sponsorship fees, give you a night in the to program in the cinema, we have a private edit suite, that maybe there's time with that. We're coming up with what the perks are, but it's like at this level, hopefully it's worth it for filmmakers that want that. And I find a lot of that comes at every level, but I find it mostly in that mid-career to established is just sort of like, they respect FilmNorth, but do they engage with us? Because there's a lot of times there's this idea that we're just we provide primarily education for up-and-comers, but there's a lot of meaningful work we can do if we're just in proximity with each other. We can start the conversations about how to help and advance careers. But
I think that's it exactly, where we need to foster more of that communication, collaboration. You said it perfectly, be in proximity to one another, right? Yeah. We tend to, kind of go in our own bubbles and do our thing, and then we pop out every now and then and say, here's my thing.
Yeah.
Right. And then rinse and repeat, and we're not moving together as a community. Yeah.
No, totally. We need community, and this is a business of relationships. We know that. So it's Cinema Lounge, which will be relaunching in our new space and be sort of reimagined to be a little more than it's been in the past. I've always told people, it's like, hey, just come. It's like you might see a film where you're like, oh, who shot that? And chances are that person's in the room.
Do you feel like getting into the Explore?
Explore Minnesota Film.
Do you want to walk into that?
Well, Minnesota's positioned to be a leader again. I do think so. I think we have to be so Explore Minnesota Film is the name of the newly formed entity that was previously Minnesota Film Board. Some will say its job is just to promote the state to producers outside of the state. That is not the case with most states, successful states. They also understand the value of a dynamic and robust homegrown market, and lifting up and building the filmmakers of tomorrow from that state. But I'll go back to my days in the 90s being a location manager. This is $1990. So, they were going to hire a Minnesota location manager before they brought in somebody who'd never been here before. So they were willing to take a chance on me, and they were ready to fire me and replace me. But I was making, $2,000 a week in mid 1990s. Being a location manager, I was able to bank that. I would work for 3 months, and then I could say yes or no to whatever job I wanted. I saved my money. I wrote scripts. And then produced the movie. The opportunity that I think, what I've seen some chatter online that's sort of like, that's rankled me a bit, where it's like, oh, the 90s were the days of the big studio films. You know what? The 90s were also the days of the independent film here. Yep. Almost every film that shot here was an independent film. And also that was when we got to shoot World in Time Enough, and it wins a festival and gets national distribution. When Ali Salim makes his commercials and he makes Sweetland. When all of these films, that was the early 2000s, but it's sort of like, from the 90s to early 2000s, it was just as much about the Minnesota creator making a movie and getting it out there. And they were doing that because they crewed the big movie. And they made money off of the big movie, but it was all in service of a career as an artist. And a lot of our crew that is chosen to stay here through the tough times are artists, and they're making movies of their own, or they have another passion that keeps them here. But it's like, I want a space for everybody here. I want big union projects, and I also want Ava DuVernay and Barry Jenkins to think that they can, the next Barry or Ava to think they can make their movie in Minnesota and not be treated like a villain. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like, but I have issues with the way the incentive is currently structured. That it doesn't, in my opinion, really attract any projects. Mm-hmm. When you do the math. Yep. On paper, it comes across, but we can fix it. I think it's right that it's a state agency. I think it's right that, that it's a transferable tax credit. I would have liked that it was refundable. We can go into the weeds on that. But you know what? It's what's politically achievable in each state. I'm sure Melody tried to get a refundable, but it wasn't doable. Mm-hmm. And it became a transferable. I think what they've been doing in northern Minnesota, there's a lot to be really, really thankful and happy about up there. And they've shown a pathway forward, which is just like the state incentive doesn't have to do everything. Mm-hmm. And the state incentive can do what the state can do. And then let's ask for others to sort of help fill the gap. And there's a reason we're seeing projects shooting up there, because northern Minnesota offers 3 different incentives that help you fill the gap and make the numbers look better. Mm-hmm. I'd like to think that the Twin Cities can come up with their own incentive. In Louisiana, they say not only do they drop the minimum spend in that state from I think it's $300,000 to $50,000 if your script was written by a Louisiana artist, but they increase the percentage from 25 to 35%. What they are saying to everybody is hire Louisianans. And it's sort of like, and guess what? Hollywood is. And it's not about on the low budget films. It's at every budget. That Louisiana is saying, hire us.
There's a strategy. There's some thinking that goes behind it, knowing that if we undergird the people that live here, right? It's a more inviting place for people to come to.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I mean, it's like Minnesota can double for anywhere, but we can also tell Minnesota stories. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like, let's incentivize Hollywood to tell Minnesota stories. We've got a lot of them. We've got a lot of writers here. They're we can't just judge it by union representation, but we've got over 30 WGA writers living here, doing work that is moving culture and is important. Every single one of them is acceptable to the studio on a $50 million movie. Yep. I'll tell you, many of them, most are. And, but on the $5 to $10 million movie, which I think will become the sweet spot for us down the road, they're right there. It's like, oh my God, you'll give me another 5%. And, mm-hmm. It's like, who can I hire?
Right. Yeah. No, that's perfect.
Well, with FilmNorth, one of the things that makes me really happy to be here and has kept me here. And I hope someone will tell me when it's time for me to move on. I don't want to be the guy that stays in the job too long. Succession at nonprofits tends to be crises. I am mentoring for someone to take over for me down the road, somebody who I believe in really strongly to lead this organization. But this building could be, we may find in a year after this building is done, that's as far as Andrew could take this organization, time to pass the baton. It's sort of like, this can't become personal. This has to be about this state and the artists that live here and moving their careers forward. And if somebody can do it better, step aside. So, but that said, what's kept me here is just my excitement about the talent that is here. The point is, the talent's here. We need to connect the talent with the people with the knowledge about how the business works. Everybody remain an artist, but the artist has to be open. Oftentimes as a producer, I hear a producer's job is to get the film made. And it's like, no, the producer's job is to get the film seen. Mm-hmm. It's like, we don't make movies to live in a closet. It has to get out and connect with an audience. And a good producer needs to understand then, what does the marketplace want? Yep. And and how does this fit in? Mm-hmm. And how, and does it need any, do we need the special person in the cameo role? How do we put this, how do we make this stand out? 'Cause it's necessary right now. I've consulted, this is my own thing. One odd example I'll throw out, there's a young Somali filmmaker that I've been working with. And I was just saying, as a programmer, if I saw a still from a film that showed a Somali lead actor against a snowy backdrop, like it comes with a question, right?
Right.
What's going on? How did this happen? For those of us that live in Minnesota, we know there's a large Somali community here. The rest of the country, do they? Do they know of Minnesota as this place where a lot of different communities and cultures have come, whether refugees or just immigrants or however they ended up here? But I said, think that's the way you distill the photo.
Yeah.
It's like, because if you think about we all look at it as we flip through Netflix, or if we go to a film festival and flip through the catalog, we look at the photo first. And then that draws us in. Have your photo ask a question, bring you in.
Yep.
And it's sort of a lot of times I find the uninformed photo of just, two people at a dinner table. Doesn't tell me anything.
Right. Right.
But that's something where it's like, and these are the nitpicks. I'm like, hey, let's talk about your film.
Well, the package. Yep.
Let's talk about how it gets out now.
We got to wrap it up, but I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for the last 20 years of mentorship that you've given me, you've given the community, and I don't like this talk of transitioning and the next generation. So hopefully there's another 20 years. I know you have the energy and the passion. So.
Oh, I'm sticking around. Don't get me wrong, but it's sort of like, but maybe I just moved to another role. But it's like, but FilmNorth, I just feel so strongly in organizations like FilmNorth and I really, I've said it in different ways, but in every bucket I've talked about, Minnesota can be a leader. Minnesota can move culture, and Minnesotans can make the change we want to see in this industry. But a lot of times as filmmakers, we do beat ourselves up. We do think, but there are so many people here to help. I don't want to paint us as the only one.
Yeah. But as a great one, they can go to filmnorth.org. Is that right? Right. And learn about the programming there, reach out to you folks, and you're there as a resource and
keep an eye out. With the new space, there are going to come new programs. So we have a newsletter. You can sign up at the bottom of each page. Every 2 weeks, you'll get an update about what's going on. We don't share our email list with anybody. We don't spam you. You're just going to get an update every 2 weeks, and it's a way to connect to community.
I get it. It's great.
Yeah. So I was just to take a look at that, and then watch this space and join us for the grand opening, where we will unveil a lot of programs. I'll tease one. We're working with Hennepin County Juvenile Detention. I'm really excited about that. We've done programs where we work with Courage Kinney Institute about using filmmaking as a way to recover from traumatic injury. There's a lot of space where film does good, and film does things that you don't expect. And artists that need it, that aren't just filmmakers. We live in a hybrid world where artists, whether they're playwrights or authors or whatever, they've got a website, they've got a need for video, and they don't know how to do it.
Right.
Come over here and connect.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you for this. This was amazing. And we'll catch up soon.
Thanks.